Ross Ulbricht was promised a pardon by President Donald Trump on day one. Well, we're already on day two, and it hasn't happened yet. He said it boldly at the Libertarian National Convention.
And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served. He's already served 11 years. We're going to get him home.
While failing to deliver on a campaign promise is nothing new for presidents, the ramifications are much more serious for Americans. It's not just about one man's sad plight in life. It's a vignette of a much larger problem: corruption in the criminal justice system and an American fetish for over-incarceration. But first, who is Ross Ulbricht? He founded the website Silk Road in 2011. It was a dark web marketplace that allowed users to buy and sell pretty much anything, such as illicit drugs. There were no murder-for-hire plots or selling of services that harmed anyone. After a 2-year investigation into the online black market, Ulbricht was arrested in October 2013. The site was shut down and federal agents seized nearly 174,000 Bitcoin. Ross was sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Not only was Ross a first-time offender, but his crime had no victim. His case was tainted by corrupt federal agents who found themselves incarcerated. All the other defendants connected to the Silk Road received sentences that averaged 6 years, including the people that helped run the site, those who were actually selling drugs, and individuals who built Silk Road 2.0, a larger replica of the same site. However, Ross remains in a high-security prison. But don't just take it from me. Listen to Representative Thomas Massie explain how ridiculous Ross's sentencing and trial was.
He was a young, peaceful, first-time offender serving a double life prison plus 40 years. The guy has been condemned to rot in prison for setting up a website called Silk Road. And there were people selling drugs on there, and he probably knew that was happening. But the people who were selling drugs on there who got convicted are already out of prison. And the guy who set up the website when he was 26 years old is now 10 years later. This fall, it will be the 10th anniversary of his time in prison. And remind people that Ross was never prosecuted for causing harm or bodily injury, and no victim was named at his trial.
While in prison, Ross has been labeled a model prisoner by the Bureau of Prisons. Despite the dangerous and harsh conditions that he lives in, Ross has never received a disciplinary action. He teaches science and math classes and tutors fellow prisoners. He leads yoga and meditation classes to help prisoners better cope with anxiety. He currently leads support groups and serves as a mediator to fellow inmates. While incarcerated, he has raised over $800,000 for charity by selling artwork. More than 150 former and current fellow prisoners have signed letters and written testimonials attesting to Ross's good influence in supporting his clemency. Before getting arrested, Ross was an Eagle Scout, an honor student, and a research scientist. He's accomplished more in prison than most of Trump's cabinet. We know how frivolously presidents take pardons. They give them to their political allies, like when Trump pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, Roger Stone, and Paul Manafort. They give them to people who don't need them, like rapper Lil Wayne, who was convicted of possessing a gun while a felon. In his first term, Trump even gave drug trafficker Alice Johnson a pardon. Trump also pardoned violent criminals like 4 Blackwater guards who were convicted of killing Iraqi civilians in the 2007 Nassau Square massacre. Trump pardoned convicted cop killer Jamie A. Davidson. He pardoned Michael Behenna, who was convicted of killing an Iraqi prisoner. And he also pardoned Clint Lawrence, who was convicted of war crimes in connection to the murder of 2 Afghan civilians. But as of day 2 into his new administration, President Trump has yet to fulfill his promise to pardon Ross Ulbricht. He didn't do it in his first term, and it's starting to look like he won't do it this time around. Before he left the White House, President Joe Biden pardoned nearly 2,500 people convicted of nonviolent drug offenses, but he didn't free Ross. And this is the president who boasted that with this move he had issued more pardons and commutations than any other president in history. But he still didn't pardon Ross. I can't think of a more nonviolent drug offender than Ross. But in reality, he didn't even sell or use drugs. He just ran a website. So that would make him a nonviolent, non-drug offender. So why does any of this matter to you? Well, if the government will put Ross in prison and throw away the key, they'll do it to you too. Aside from the small subgroup of activists and concerned libertarians who bring it up, no one bothers to mention Ross and the disproportionate sentence that he's received. Ross has been incarcerated for more than a decade, but you won't hear Republicans bring it up, who also like to complain of political persecution over January 6th. And you won't hear Democrats mention it, who like to push for criminal justice reform. And you definitely won't hear about Ross from the mainstream media. What if while TikTok was banned for about half a day, you used it, and then the government decided to accuse you of being engaged in espionage for the CCP, and then tossed you in prison for the rest of your life? Yeah, those would be trumped-up charges. It would be abuse of power. It would be corrupt. It would be wrong. But it could happen. I doubt Ross thought he was getting life in prison for starting a website. Ross Ulbricht's story reminds me of a poem by Martin Niemöller. It's etched on the walls of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. It reads, and I quote, "First they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." When the government comes for you, will there be anyone left to speak for you? Do your part and peacefully remind Trump that it's time to fulfill his day one promise and free Ross now. Now that you know where we've been, find out where we're going. Tune in to Ladies Love Politics, where you can stay informed without going insane.